Welcome back to Rainbow Six Extraction. In this video I want to go through why people hate this game so much, because there are a lot of people that have mixed opinions about the game. Before we do jump into this one, if you are not currently subbed to the channel, make sure you do sub, turn notifications on. All support is greatly appreciated. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like to let me know. And if you're interested in further supporting me as a creator, check out the links in the description. But not only that, I want to see your thoughts in the comments, not just to why you think people hate the game, but also what you think of this style of content on the channel. Right now, I'm putting together a couple of scripts. I've got this one, I've got one for Watch Dogs Legion, and I want to talk about the games and how people feel. For Legion, it would be why Ubisoft have officially abandoned the game. But I'm putting scripts together and going through the history of development, all that sort of stuff. And I want to know if you guys are interested. And not only that, how can I make it more interesting for you to watch? So instead of sitting there and going through Wikipedia and looking at the history of the game and some of the people involved, what else could I do to make it more interesting for you as a viewer? So let me know all of that stuff down below and let's jump into it. So, Rainbow Six started as a franchise back in 1998 with the release of Rainbow Six, and that released for the Nintendo 64, the PS1 and the Dreamcast. Rainbow Six has always been a tactical shooter that's been focused on, in Vegas you have Terrorist Hunt, and I believe that's available in Siege as well. But it's always been human against human, whereas Extraction is human against alien or Archean. We moved from Rainbow Six in 98, a few other games releasing in between then and 2006 when we got Rainbow Six Vegas, and then Vegas 2 followed in 2008, both being released on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. They then released a mobile game called Rainbow Six Shadow Vanguard in 2011, and they also cancelled a project called Rainbow Six Patriots to move on to Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Siege released in 2015 for all major gaming platforms, and it rebooted the whole tactical shooter franchise as an online-only PvP title. They've then led us to this current day with the Siege spin-off Extraction, which takes it to a co-op PvE experience. Extraction has received mixed opinions from a lot of people, with most actually being negative. But I've seen time and time again, this is based on what I've seen in reviews and stuff that I've watched or listened to, and even going through comment sections on videos, it's because people are basing this purely on Siege due to the operators and gadget layouts and things like that. But people do seem to forget that it's a standalone release, which is a direct spin-off from Siege. So whilst it does take the operators and a lot of gadgets, it also has its own unique sort of thing to bring to the table where you're fighting aliens instead of humans. You have an objective-based game to play. So the question this leaves me with is, why did they only use Siege operators, and why couldn't they create any unique characters to play as for their standalone title? If it was DLC in Rainbow Six Siege, I totally understand having only Siege operators. And I get content's going to come for the game in the future. But as a standalone title, one that received delays and everything, why did it not have its own unique operators that are brand new to the Rainbow Six franchise? In 2018, Siege released an event called Outbreak, which saw the exact same enemies from Extraction being used, and I think that's annoyed players even more. Because it feels like 2015, you get the operators in Siege, 2018, you get Outbreak, put them together, they're charging money for that game. Even though it's a spin-off, people do expect more than just grabbing two games or a game and an event in the game, merging them together and making a new title. Because that is essentially what they have done. Even though it's a spin-off, they've grabbed Siege, they've grabbed the Outbreak event, slung them together, called it Extraction, and boom, there's a £35 purchase. So what I don't get is, why make an event in Siege, be an Outbreak, using the enemies of Extraction, and why use the Siege operators in Extraction, when what they could have done is expanded on Outbreak in Rainbow Six Siege, made that a permanent expansion, which would have cost less money for the players, and it probably would have led to a very similar outcome in terms of gameplay. Looking on Metacritic, the highest score for the game based on user ratings is a 5.8, and that's on the Xbox Series X. And in terms of critic ratings, it's received a 74 out of 100 on the PlayStation 5. In terms of development of the game, according to Jason Schreier, Extraction originated from a project named Pioneer, which was first teased in Watch Dogs 2. It was originally envisioned as a sci-fi exploration game, until it was repurposed in 2019 with the Siege engine. The game is based on the Outbreak event from Siege, which is quite obvious to the players. But they started off before 2019 with a vision to have it as a sci-fi exploration game, and then they just went with, we're going to take stuff from Siege, repurpose this in 2019, and I mean, at the beginning of 2022, we now have Extraction. And what they have said, as I told you, my source for this is Wikipedia. The reason they released the game as a standalone title is that the game is intended to be an experience for players that are not interested in the PvP game Siege, which does actually make sense in my opinion. If they release a PvE experience in Siege and the PvP players won't play because they want PvP, and the PvE players won't buy Siege for the PvE experience because the game is solely a PvP title. A lot of P's and a lot of V's and a lot of E's. But I think it was a good idea to make it a standalone, but they needed to do more to give players an incentive to purchase it. Not just do the typical release where they show a trailer, they delay it, they show another trailer, they change the title of the game, and then they go, boom, here's your release. They should have done much more with the game, even if, like, for an example, create a brand new roster of 6 operators, and then set out a roadmap of what's to come. Like, give players that encouragement to purchase the game. They shouldn't have just done the standard typical release of a game, because that's part of the reason why I think a lot of people are put off. There's no reason for them to really pick this up. They can go and play other PvE experiences, or if they want to use the operators, just go play Siege. You see a lot of PvE players dipping their toes in PvP from time to time. I'm one of those players myself. And you see a lot of PvP players just chilling, coming off the PvP sort of games and going to a PvE experience, even if it's for a short amount of time. Players do mix it up. And by using the operators from Siege, they believed that they could attract Siege players to play the game, and also have it as a good entry point for new players. So they kind of wanted to keep it, it's a direct spin-off. They wanted to keep it within the story of Siege and the Outbreak event. They wanted to also encourage, because obviously Rainbow Six Siege is a huge title for Ubisoft, they wanted to keep their Siege players happy by bringing the operators in. But I've seen a lot of Siege players say they don't care about this game. Not even just because there's aliens, because it's not PvP, because it's not Siege. There's a multitude of different reasons. And also in terms of development of the game, one of their earlier challenges with development was combining elements of a Horde mode shooter into the Rainbow Six franchise. Because most Rainbow Six titles do focus extensively on using firearms to gun down enemies, whereas Extraction focuses on the objectives and surviving the encounters with the aliens, as the team believe the characters in the game, which are members of a SWAT team, should not be entrenched and shoot and mow down hundreds of enemies, and instead should surprise the enemies by ambushing them. The reason we get MIA operators in the game is because the development team believed that adding the feature could induce a sense of tension, since players always need to decide whether or not to continue through the different subzones in the game and risk losing an operator temporarily. A lot of times, through communications in my spare time when I'm sitting there playing the game, I'm talking to people saying, you've just been KO'd, I've taken you back to the extraction point. Do I carry on with 20 health and try and complete it to get more XP, or do I just leave with my operator? It definitely does add that sort of extra thinking point, and you have to be a little bit more tactical and strategic with it. The game was originally revealed on June 10th, 2019 during E3, with a release date of 2020 and the name Rainbow Six Quarantine. It was then delayed 4 months later, in October 2019, just to give the team more time. Not only that, it was delayed alongside Watch Dogs Legion, and I believe there might have been 1 or 2 more, and it was because there was a huge backlash in terms of Ghost Recon Breakpoint and the Division 2 not selling too well. So the CEO of Ubisoft said, all our games are going to be delayed, we're going to put more time and effort into them. It was, however, then delayed again due to other difficulties, with the title Rainbow Six Extraction being announced in June 2021, so 2 years later. And it was then again delayed until January 2022. An email invitation went out for people to jump into a tech test for the game on November 2nd, with the test taking place a few days later. The game did then release on Jan 20th, 2022, with not only a reduced price compared to other Ubisoft titles, but a buddy pass which allows you to bring your friends into the game completely free to try it out with you. And then you have availability through Xbox Game Pass with cross-play enabled. So in terms of the game, treating it as a standalone and not basing the entire thing on Rainbow Six Siege like a lot of people have, my personal opinion, it is a fantastic game that offers a lot of replayability and has different ways of keeping the player engaged. It's one of the only games I've played from a big company in the last few years that has a small amount of teething problems and actually works almost perfectly, which is much needed in the gaming industry, and is a pleasant surprise from a company like Ubisoft. I can see the reason that people are mad. It does seem incredibly lazy, purely using Siege operators, and then on top of that, ripping things from a 2018 The Siege event. It also leaves the question as to why the game took so long to develop if they didn't need to create a lot of stuff from scratch. I can also see that Siege players won't like the game, and the same goes for a lot of other players, being an alien shooting game. Both critics and users leaving reviews have been far too harsh in my opinion. The game is fun, it's a smooth experience, and it offers good value. Usually, when a game's really bad, you'll see everyone getting involved, jumping on the bandwagon, bashing the game left, right and centre. But even if a game isn't perfect, but it does still work, you'll barely see anyone praising it because it somehow still isn't good enough. The gaming industry is made up of people working their jobs, and not everything can be perfect, so I'm very pleased they worked on this game and took the time they needed. And I'm kind of going against my initial review for this game, but I believe the game is worth its asking price if you don't have Game Pass. I based my initial review on probably nowhere near as much gameplay time as I should have done, but since playing a lot more in my own spare time, I've come to really thoroughly enjoy playing the game. One of the best features for me is the VoIP, the in-game chat, because a lot of people in this game will communicate with you. I do like their idea behind releasing it standalone, as to not have PvE players jumping on Siege and to not have PvP players getting annoyed about something PvE being in Siege. I do really feel they could have created more unique assets for the game, new operators and stuff, but as far as I am aware, they have announced new things coming into the game, so I'm happy to play as it is and experience that stuff when it is released. I'm not personally too sure about the MIA operators in this game. I think it can be very irritating at times when you're getting used to using a character, but I am open to the idea as well, because it gives you a reason to play with other characters, and you can't just abuse the one character because they're a meta. Especially when you can't take like two of the same character into a match. I think the idea of having the MIA operators and your operators getting injured, I think that's a 50-50 feature, but I do quite like it at the same time as not being a big fan of it, if that makes any sense at all. There are a couple of issues in this game, which I would also like to mention in another video at some point, but server problems, players not being able to connect to matches, searching for matches taking ages, including deploying into the game when the server and players have been established and connected. There is also a revive bug that I've come across where reviving doesn't work properly, but that is it. And imagine that, a Ubisoft title released in 2022 only having a small amount of issues. This game is that. The gameplay cycle is fun. It could get boring if you play it all the time, but what game doesn't really? There are helpful gadgets. When you get to milestone 25, you get this laser sight that you just look at the sprawl, as they call it, but basically the slime stuff. You look at it and it disappears. When you stand in it, that stuff really slows you down. You have different objectives and locations. You have different difficulties available. When you move up the difficulties, you start getting mutations. The enemies become harder. Mutations are things like nests being armoured, so you can't shoot them. You have to go up to them and stab them. You also get things like all the enemies being invisible, so it adds an extra layer of strategy to the game. You also have some endgame in there as well. You have Maelstrom, which is, instead of your typical 3 objectives each run, you will have 9 to take on. And you do get some unique rewards for getting high progress or good progress in that mode. I highly recommend this game to anyone looking for a fun game that can either be played solo or in co-op, and that isn't going to cost you $70 to $120 and be completely broken. I rate this game really high, and I personally look forward to the future of the game. And on that note, I would like to know your opinions. Why do you like this game? Why don't you like this game? What could make it better? So on and so forth. So let me know your thoughts and stuff in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope you enjoyed it.